Hello everyone, how are you doing? This is Daryl Guberman, CEO of Guberman PMC LLC, a quality consulting firm here in Connecticut. We've been in business now going on 13 years as of August. Our background being aerospace, medical implants, materials, and plastic distribution, where we dealt with all the industries under the sun. Today, this video is very important. This goes to the board of directors at Boeing, since David Calhoun mentioned that he is going to be stepping down from his leadership role, rightfully so. I'm going to bring you through the litany very briefly, I hope, to let you know what has happened at Boeing to degrade it down to this level. In 2019, when David sat on Boeing's board, Boeing was made an FAA regulator. That means they did not have to tell anyone about the MCAS system that they put into the airplane. They did not have to tell them about any type of redesigns on the 777, 787. They are and were the regulator. So when you hear David talk about their regulator, the FAA, let me ask you, business owners, my fellow citizens, can one regulator watch over another? You're going to see in this video, and I'm going to read you the title, Attention Personal and Confidential. Board members at Boeing QA expert Daryl Guberman, next CEO. And let me give you a little bit of background so that you know my background is not a bunch of BS. I have a BS in business management. Yes, a BS degree in business, yes. We have taken many technical courses from the Materials Engineering Institute at Mel's Parks, Ohio, which is run by the Materials Engineering Institute. I took 10 diplomas in order to graduate 5 technical certificates. The 10 courses are aluminum and its alloys, corrosion, composites the basics, composites 2, material selection and applications, principles of metallography, titanium and its alloys, principles of failure analysis, fundamental of non-destructive testing, welding, inspection, and quality control, mechanical testing of metals. The diplomas, all those 10 homogenized into these 5 technical diplomas. Composite engineering technology, non-ferrous metallurgy, testing and inspection, welding metallurgy, applied general metallurgy, hardcore learning, Scranton, PA. Level 1 and 2, plastic films and sheets, foams and laminates. Certificate in plastic adhesives and coatings. Certificate in industrial plastics. Lean awareness and Kaizen training from Constep. I can tell you a story about those, but we'll continue. Clean Harbor certificate for hazardous waste. International Association of Plastic Distributors. Plastic Certificate Program 1 and 2, Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute, Hartford, Connecticut, Certificate in Quality Management. So we're going to continue on. This goes, as I said, we have a letter that we will read in another video that we contacted David Calhoun, but it fell on deaf ears. He didn't know what an escape was. Do you think he's going to know what quality is? Absolutely. More than likely not. You have the American National Standards Institute, ANSI, which is a private, not-for-profit, non-governmental corporation that has federal agencies and corporations on board. You have the factor that ANAB, the American National Accreditation Board, sits on ANSI's board, and ANSI sits on their board in kind, or in turn. In 2018, ANSI handed over ANSI took over complete leadership of ANAB, okay? They are underwriters, and you'll see that very shortly. They are underwriters for the International Accreditation Form, which they sat on and sit on, which is a repository for both national and international accreditation bodies. ANSI is a founder of the International Accreditation Forum. We have all this data. At the time, between 2015 and 18, the IAF was handed over to a communist Chinese national, with all our federal agencies on board, with all our corporations on board, talking about hacking and cybersecurity issues. Wow. So between 2015 and 21, they were run by a communist Chinese national, Zhao Jinwu, who's been involved with our quality for over, since 1994. So what is that, 30 years? So that's it. So anyway, Zhao Jinwu also at the time was the chief executive of the China National Accreditation Services, who certified the laboratory in Wuhan, China that released the COVID virus. The reason why I say it released it, because you have the vice president of ANSI ANAB's accreditation for laboratory, Pamela Sales said under deposition in Texas. She said from one laboratory to another, there are variants. There's really no protocol. So that is why the virus escaped. She confessed to it. And by the way, ANSI ANAP are underwriters for the China National Accreditation Services. We're going to continue on. This is an actual federal contract that shows unequivocally that ANSI ANAP are underwriters for the IAF, and they're also underwriters for the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation in Australia. During this time in 2018, remember what I told you, I told you that IAF was controlled by a communist Chinese national who is mandated by his country of origin, China, to take our data through the China National Intelligence Law, Article number 7. Here is the top of the actual document that states that ANSI ANAP are underwriters for the IAF. Now we go on to Boeing and Mr. David Calhoun. Boeing also sits on ANSI's board, right over by the accreditation body, which you will see that they force down their suppliers' throats. And they sit on, and they're the controlling factor on the board, and we're going to show you how, what, and why. They sit on the board of directors of ANSI ANAP that can control the steering of the ship. And they also sit on the board of ANSI ANAP that can grant, suspend, and withdraw certification. And also, you have Boeing sitting on there. In 2002, they came out with a supplier bulletin. This supplier bulletin is very important. I'm going to break it down. You don't have to read it. It's going to be in the body of this, in the description. You'll find it in articles. Many of them have this actual link. And it basically states this. It says, if you are AS9100 for aerospace, only accredited by ANSI ANAP, send us your certificate, send us your parts, and Boeing does not have to go visit you, do an on-site audit to see if you're not making a part in a swamp. They gave it up for 22 years of that type of inspection. In 2009, they were made FAA regulators, of course, by the FAA no less. And it states this: FAA increased authority of Boeing's commercial airplanes division to self-certify its own aircraft. And this is what talks about, they didn't have to tell the FAA about MCAST, and here it goes. Authority extended to Boeing under the new system allows Boeing employees to perform tasks on behalf of the FAA that include oversight of testing and product standards, along with, here it goes, certification of aircraft technologies, that's for MCAST, and new aircraft designs like the 777, 787. Sitting on the board, on the portal of Boeing, Boeing is sticking this down your throat, you have to be ANSI ANAP or international equivalent. And as I told you, here they are, sitting on the board. This has not changed. It's basically similar in 2023, 2024. We have that actual snapshot. Look, the page is the same. They have Boeing on board that can grant, suspend, and withdraw the certification. So look at it this way, ladies and gentlemen, business owners. 2002, Boeing comes out with a supplier bulletin that says, send us your AS9100 certificate. As long as it's accredited by ANAP, because Boeing sits on the board, we have control over it. Send it in, you have robust quality, send in your parts, and Boeing doesn't have to do an on-site audit. That's number one. Number two is on their supplier portal. It states, must be ANSI ANAP or international equivalent. So they sit on the board also of ANSI ANAP. Sit on the board, supplier portal, and then the bulletin 3 times. They are breaking the Sherman Act, unbelievably so, against my business, because we tried, as we may when we first started our certification business, to have our companies that were coming under our umbrella go into Boeing, and they would say, no, we only accept the ANSI ANAP. No, we only accept. That is restriction of trade. That is breaking the Sherman-Clayton Act of 1914. David Calhoun should be held up on charges because of that, because they would not allow me in. And I was approved in 2013. I gave a speech at the American Society for Quality. At that time, the ASQ owned ANAP 50%. Also, ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, owned ANAP 50%. A Dave Levy was sent there to destroy me, Region 3 director. He said, Mr. Guberman, ANAP has no problem with you. In fact, we support you in what you're doing. Well, in 2016, we had a Mr. Randy Dory, who in 2015 was the guy who handed over leadership to the IAF to the communist Chinese national Zhao Jinwu. Are you getting the story now? So Randy was, at that time, the vice president of ANAP. He was the chairman and principal on the IAF tax report in I-90. He wrote us in 2016 and he said, Mr. Guberman, if you want to join either ANAB or IAF or both, go right ahead. We welcome you. It's voluntary. It's not voluntary, we discovered, but we did discover this. Why would I, as a proud American, ladies and gentlemen, those who have an ANAB accredited certificate, why would I want to get involved with them when the IAF, which is a repository for ANSI ANAB as well, that they sit on, was being watched over by a communist national who has mandated by his country of origin to take our data through the China National Intelligence Law, Article number 7. And we maintained our independence. Yet those two people, Mr. David Levy and Mr. Randy Doherty, did not push it up the chain of command. As you see on the supplier portal, must be ANSI ANAB or international equivalent. As you see of their bulletin, and if you read it, it says must be ANSI ANAB, or at that time it was ANSI NAPRAP. It's still ANSI ANAB. And then, of course, they sit on the board. So they constricted the ability for my business to compete in the marketplace. Okay, let's continue on. And here they are, as an FAA regulator, and they're fudging documentation. Maybe they learned that from the FAA. On top of it, I say this again. Most recently, the Bell Boeing composite facility in Pennsylvania got fined by the Department of Justice $8.1 million. Sitting on the board of ANSI is the FAA, right over by Boeing, all the rest. Here's the Department of Justice who investigates things. They sit right over by Boeing. The Federal Trade Commission, they sit over by Boeing. These are only samples. U.S. Department of Transportation as well. The FBI. And also the Department of Defense. When you ask these people who are accredited by ANSI ANAB that have AS 90-100 certificates, this is what they have told me in my 13 years of business: pay to play. So I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to be reading you the letter in another video. It may be down below this video about David Calhoun and me warning him several times. The last video I said, what that came out was Daryl Guberman, QA expert, gives David Calhoun a stern warning about Boeing. And this is what I'm going to finalize this as. By David Foster Wallace. The truth will set you free, but not until it is finished with you. And to the board of directors at Boeing, I put my hat into the ring because you need a can-do man. You can't run this company like the King and Queen of England. And it's run that way. You know this guy, Dave Calhoun, bring him in, he sits on the board, and then they put him in as a CEO. You need an outsider with outside eyes who can roll up their sleeves, get down on the floor, and do their business, and bring their ship around before it sinks. 203-556-1493 or Daryl, TQRS @yahoo.com. I look forward to hearing from you.